Dan was like not really chuffed about the idea of like my standing over his shoulder, go, oh no, do that, oh no, do that, oh no, do that. He's like, look, if you need to do that, we need to have you do that as the CEO. So we collectively made that decision kind of early December. I forget which day, it was like the 5th or the 6th, and then we pretty quickly moved through it.
You have this strong interest in sort of doing good and doing well.
So my principal motivation is, how do you change the world? Right. I don't think that, when you look at, one of the questions that I ask executives when I'm interviewing them is, you write your obituary, what is happy? What makes you happy?
When I read that, I thought, how smart is that? I mean, that's such a great idea.
Right, because it's a question of, well, what do you want to be known for? What meaning do you want your life to have had? And he or she who dies with the biggest bank balance isn't a terribly interesting life. I mean, fine, you were successful at playing this game business, but that's not really it. And
you can't take it with you.
Yeah, well, and is that really the meaning, the measure of a life, right? So, and so for me, the reason I was...
And it says to you what it is their passion is about in terms of the life they want to lead.
Yes, exactly.
Do they want to make a difference? Do they want to be creative? Do they want, in a sense, to create something that will offer opportunities for a range of people and perhaps create some product or some endeavor that will influence people?
And which audiences matter to them? Because some people say, look, what I care about is being a good friend or a good parent, right? And those are great. Those audiences are important, right? But for me, it's, how do you change the lives of millions of people, right? And when you do stuff in the economic arena, you're trying to do that both with the business you're creating, and then also, I mean, what money is a form of kind of reified power, control over resources, and then you can spend that on things.
Now, suppose that you wanted to go to heaven, and there is a heaven, and you've asked me to make the case for you.
Yeah.
What is my strongest piece of evidence?
Well, I'd say, well, I guess everyone could say poll all your friends. So I guess I would say, I've served on, well, so with LinkedIn, I'm trying to transform a lot of people's economics lives, right? So I'm trying to make them more effective and more productive, and a better matchmaking between economic opportunities and improving people's lives. And then generally speaking, most of the things I do, like I'm on the Kiva board for doing microfinance, most of the things I do are aimed at how do people live kind of healthier, have more self-empowerment in their lives.
And I believe this is not exactly on point, but that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has been successful, will be increasingly successful because of Melinda and Bill, wanting to impose a structure, an architecture, a standard of efficiency and results to do good.
Yes, absolutely.
You said, for example, once, when you want to influence the structure for millions and millions of people, you actually need to have a strong economic model that scales.
Yes.
If you can create structures where the interest of hundreds of thousands of millions of people align with the group's interest, then you can actually create things that generate a lot of value in the system.
Exactly right. And if it has a powerful economic model behind it, it means it survives, right? So the difference between a company which is $1 profitable and $1 unprofitable is essentially immortality and death, right? So if you want to have an influence over, decades, hundreds of years, thousands is probably too much to hope for, create sustainable models which, in the action of that organism, I look at companies as organisms within an ecosystem. Within the action of it, it produces good. Right. And if you do that, you've created a massive amount of good.
If you could look at the most successful people that you have known in this arena of technology, would they also have been the brightest?
Some and some.
Some and some, but not necessarily.
Yes.
What would be the difference for those who were not necessarily the brightest? What would they have had?
What would they have had?
As a core competence or a core skill or a core value structure that enabled them to do well?
Well, so there's always some luck. Right.
Okay, so one, we said brains, but not necessarily. Luck, but not necessarily.
Exactly.
What else, but not necessarily?
A capacity for taking risk.
Yeah.
Right. So
if you can't take risk, if your risk does not burn in your being, then you shouldn't be an entrepreneur.
Yes, exactly. Well, and actually, everybody. See, one of the things is, I now think part of what's been happening over the last couple of decades is I actually think every individual is now an entrepreneur, whether they recognize it or not. Because it used to be that you got a job at one company and you were there 20, 30, 40 years. That's been dead for decades. That's even dying in Japan. The salaryman no longer even exists in Japan. Average job lengths are 2 to 4 years. That makes you a small business. You are the entrepreneur of your own small business. How do you get to your next gig? How do you do your career progression? All of these things now fall on an individual's shoulders. And so they're essentially an entrepreneur. Now, they're not an entrepreneur a la I go create, Google, LinkedIn, a business. They're an entrepreneur in terms of the business of themselves and how they drive that. So it's how they get like their next job opportunity, how they get a promotion. All of that stuff comes from how they manage their network around them, which is, by the way, what gave me the idea for LinkedIn. But I think that one of the key things, the reason why I think risk tolerance is important is because what happens is people delude themselves that they're not taking risks. They say, oh, I'm going to get a job at, Hewlett Packard, or I'm going to get a job, and that's not risky. Well, look at current economic climates. Everything in life has some risk, and what you have to actually learn to do is how to navigate it. And people who take risk intelligently can usually actually make a lot more progress than people who don't.
Some say that risk has been given a bad name because of what's happened on Wall Street.
Yes, well, there's a huge difference between intelligent risk-taking and stupid risk-taking. Now, the trick is to know the difference. Or
leveraging so much that the slightest tweak will send you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, over-leverage, this is actually one of the things that makes me mildly nervous even on the stimulus package, because if you think about what our problem is leverage, what is a stimulus package? Borrow money, spend it.
Right.
So I think it's really...
With the model being that it'll create jobs and therefore...
So therefore I think to do it successfully, you actually have to make sure that the stimulus that you're spending in is actually creating sustainable jobs. So I'm a huge believer in the way that you actually get out of these economic downturns is through entrepreneurship, because that creates new kinds of jobs that actually have longevity and strength to them. If you investing in an industry that has, for example, known problems, you're just delaying the problem, that's not necessarily a good thing.
You once said, I think, or predicted that LinkedIn would double its membership in 2009, and you were trying to sign up, get this, 1 in 4 of the world's population. Is that?
We're still trying to do 1 in 4 of the world's population.
How long will that take?
Well, it depends on how much we accelerate. So currently we're doing a professional every second, and we're doing about 1 million every 17 days or so, right? So that would be, I haven't actually done the calculation and haven't predicted how much the world's population is growing. It would take probably, 6 or 7 years, maybe 8 years at that pace, presuming also connectivity, internet, and all the rest of it. We hope to accelerate that number.
How do you monetize it?
So we've been profitable the last 2 years. Q4 was actually our highest revenue quarter ever.
Is this a calendar year?
Q4 last quarter.
Right.
And our primary revenue streams, we have 3 of them. One of them is subscriptions on the site. You can take out your credit card, you get better search functionality, a better way of contacting people directly. And we figure that's useful for when you're trying to accelerate your business practice. You're using LinkedIn as a serious business professional. We have a software as a service business, primarily driven by recruiting. And as a surprise, we're actually doing quite well at that currently. You would think that with layoffs and everything else that business is being hit. Currently, we're the disruptive low-cost provider of really good hiring services. So when you're hiring 50 people as opposed to 1,000 people, we're still growing there, so that's useful. And then advertising, the comparable to the Wall Street Journal demographic.
So look ahead for me for the next 10 years. What role will social networking play in professional networking, and how will it change?
Do you normally get answers on 10-year questions
from
Silicon Valley people?
No.
10 years feels like a really long time.
They normally say, can we stay within this year?
Yes, exactly. Or 2, maybe.
Yeah.
So what I think is going to happen is, so I think social and professional networking are distinct. I think you establish distinct profiles there. In social, it's how are you fun, entertaining, why are you good to go on a date with, etc. Professional is what are you good at, what should people hire you for, what should they consult with you, if they're creating a group for shared interest on, evolving the best professional practices, who should they invite in, that sort of thing. Alumni for universities and corporations, that sort of thing. So I think that in both of these cases, I think everyone's going to have both a social and professional profile. I think they will be connected to people they trust past, and there's some overlap between these, but I find in my own personal experience, it's about a 20% overlap, right? There's about 20% of the people are both social, like people I want to share pictures with, and people who are professional, but the other ones are distinct. And I think that people will use it within a few years. I think it'll be even more than daily. I think it'll be, at least for professional, every couple of hours in terms of how you're solving problems.
Yeah. I actually think that solving problems is a huge part of the future.
Yes.
There is also this, and we have to close. It is, I always ask this, so I'll make this first and then I'll follow up. What's the biggest new idea? What's the great new idea out there waiting to happen?
What LinkedIn is betting on, which I think is a big idea, I don't know if it's the biggest idea, it's the one I spend the most time on, is we live in now a world which is going flat and global and competitive.
Right.
And how do you as an individual stay competitive as a professional? How do you manage yourself as a business? And I actually think that what's going to happen is we're going to have an accelerating productivity, like what you saw in the Industrial Revolution, as a basis of people getting sharper in how they work and how they execute tasks and information they find.
More efficient, more productive, more everything.
Exactly. And I think...
Because of tools.
Because of tools. And I think it'll go both on the internet and then the internet going to mobile. Like iPhones or Blackberries.
Everything will be on the mobile.
Yes.
And so what does that mean for the PC? You'll still use a PC, but for different purposes, or what?
Well, I think you'll use
it... Or the Mac, whatever.
Well, I think you'll use PC for various, and I use both a PC and a Mac, for large information consumption. So, for example, I've always been a fan of using very big monitors, because like I write an outline and then I write the thing next to it, and I write really quickly. When you need a monitor for that kind of processing or interacting with information, it's really critical. And however good your phone in your pocket becomes, a screen like this is only so much. Right. Now the screen like this helps you real time, where you're always on and you can do stuff and on the go. But for example, even though I was one of the earliest BlackBerry users in California, and had been what we call it crackberry frequently here for a very long time, I still prefer to author emails on my computer, because I can type, like I can see the information, I can hold up what I'm replying to, and I can be going, okay, I need to make a point about this, okay, I need to make a point about that.
Right.
And so that sort of information participation is still much more useful on a higher form factor with a better keyboard.
What do you carry in your pocket?
I carry a BlackBerry, an iPhone, and a regular cell phone.
So do I. Those three. Exactly.
Yes,
Explain to the world. So I'm tired of explaining. Would you explain?
Okay.
It's also true of Eric Schmidt. It's true of a lot of people I know.
Yep. Well, I hope he has a G1 now, but
This is the Android or whatever it is?
Exactly. Yeah. So the regular cell phone is my daily phone.
Right.
I don't use it as phone. It's the phone that I meet with people, talk on. It's my communications device. BlackBerry is email, address book and calendar, and the iPhone is web.
That's exactly the way I see it. Yeah, not nearly as
it's a good
proficient as you are.
Yes.
Everybody will say, from Bill Gates around, and Sergey and Larry and all these other wizards on this coast, will say that we're just beginning in terms of the potential of application and productivity from the internet.
I think they're absolutely right.
We're in the second inning.
That may be early, yes. We may be the end of the first inning, right? Because, basically, if you look at a lot of the growth of the internet in the last decade, a lot of it's entertainment, watching clips of videos on YouTube, et cetera, sharing pictures, all this sort of stuff. We are just beginning to explore how effective finding of information and communication and distribution of information makes you a lot more effective. We are just beginning that. And all the cloud computing stuff and moving the apps in the cloud, that's valuable, but you already know word processing.
No, exactly right.
What happens when it's
doing
networked?
It somewhere else, too.
Yes. And then what happens when it's networked? When you get the network of intelligence behind it, I think it's going to be spectacular. Yeah. And I actually hope it'll accelerate us through this recession, right? It's one of the things.
I haven't spoken to that, so I'm glad you brought me to that. So what's the impact of the recession on the world you live in?
So Silicon Valley, because it's very future and investment oriented, is still, I think, less badly hit than many areas of the world or country. I have a modest hope. This is back to the Change World stuff, that because I think entrepreneurship is really what has a chance of accelerating us through the recession, that LinkedIn kind of providing the tools for entrepreneurs will help with that, because obviously everyone's worried about, is this like the 1930s, right? And can we get through it faster and more effectively? And I think, part of the benefit of a network is bringing together, financiers, employees, customers, advisors, et cetera, and bringing all those all together in a really powerful way. And I think that if you look at what's going on in the Valley, people are still trying to figure out how, like, they go, okay, we have a problem, we have an economic recession. What kinds of things can I build that will work now?
Thank you for coming.
My pleasure.